Nice to have you with us. And we also have Mr. Manoj Jain, who is Chairman and Managing Director of GAIL India, the Gas Authority of India. Hello, Manoj. Hello. I see.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Michael. Thank you.
Welcome indeed. And then our third panelist, a regular at this India Energy Summit, Ernie Thrasher, who is Chief Executive Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of Xcoal Energy and Resources. Hello, Ernie. Are you there? Hello.
Morning, Michael. Good evening, everyone.
Well, welcome to all three of you. Let's get straight into this, and I think we should start with Manoj Jain. I'm very interested to hear from you as a starter about what kind of developments we've seen in the Indian market in the last 12 months since the 2019 Indian Energy Forum. Manoj.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Michael, and good evening, everyone. As you rightly pointed out, the last 1 year has been quite volatile, and the India Energy Forum, last third edition we did physically in India, and this fourth edition we are doing virtually, and COVID has been one of the prominent reasons for this, and India is no exception to this volatility, and we have seen the natural gas prices quite sharply dropping down, and in between there have been significant volatility in between in the month of January and February, even before the COVID impact was there. So looking to all that, definitely this gave some uncertainties in the initial period. But the good thing is that the government utilized this part to bring the policy reforms and efforts by all the stakeholders towards laying the foundations for this transition from 6 to 15%. As you said, it is a tough target, definitely, but this was the time when initial 3-4 months we could not do much on the ground, but government did much on the policy front. So those are the good times during this last 1 year we have had, and I can happy to share that in India the gas consumption has fast picked up to the pre-COVID levels in the month of September or so, which is the fastest growth for any of the commodity which has happened, and the gas was one of the premier resource which was again has come back to the pre-COVID levels. So from that perspective, it gives a good signal that yes, gas is now a better preferred choice among the consumers. We also saw significant new productions, and which have partly commenced from the National Oil Company ONGC from high pressure, high temperature, difficult fields. And though there is some delay, but as we heard yesterday, Mr. From BP, Mr. Looney, that maybe in a month's time they will also be beginning their production from the east coast of India. So those things are going to be very significant from the domestic gas markets growth, because those prices are determined with a ceiling which is truly for the reflecting the market prices for the difficult fields. So definitely this is going to be one of the bigger change in the last 1 year when these two gases come, which I am sure that will be available this year, and definitely it will help the Indian market to akin to more towards the natural gas economy. We have also seen few days back the government has standardized the process for e-bidding for the gases which were available for the marketing and pricing freedom, which has been allowed to most of the new gas field development plans which government has announced of late. So that standardized process will also help in developing the market. So that is also one good development which has taken place in the month of October this year itself. Apart from this, the LNG imports have also been steadily growing, and this year also we have seen the domestic production and they were down. The LNG imports degrowth was not that significant. So overall, the LNG imports have increased share as compared to domestic gas now after the COVID period. So we have also 2 LNG regas terminals which were commissioned the last year, and now we have total capacity of around 40 million tons per annum, which is expected to further double next few years. So we can see that now the last 1 year has been significant when the government started working for twin objectives of infrastructure creation and market development. Just to give a brief, that presently around 70,000 kilometers of pipeline we are having as a part of national gas grid, and the government has embarked upon, and almost all the balance limbs of that national gas grid have been awarded. So we expect that in next 3 to 4 years, this length will be more than double to around 35,000 kilometers, and that will connect basically the basic national gas grid. So the gas will be available in all across the country in the eastern as well as northeastern and southern part of India also, which is a very significant development in increasing the consumption of gas. This total new investment is going to be of the order of 13 billion US dollars. On the market development front, we also saw the emergence of a gas exchange. The first gas exchange came, and maybe we are expecting 1 or 2 more gas exchanges in coming year to come. Of course, the bringing gas under the GST is a work in progress. We expect that it will also soon take place. And just to finish off my thing, that the CGD, as you touched upon, 9th and 10th bidding round, fruits are now getting financial closures, and we may come up with the 11th bidding round this year again. Apart from this, the last thing is that the government is also working towards LNG stations along the Golden Quadrilateral, which will connect north, east, west, and south India across the highways. So that will be a big boost for long-haul transportation of the LNG. Thank you. And I think with this, we can touch upon that this last year has been very significant for us on the policy front.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Certainly, you've given us a sense of a huge amount of activity, and I'm always struck that people often refer to the infrastructure challenge, and I'm really struck by the progress that's been made, and you referred to the connections of the east and south of the country, and I think we really need to embrace how this has become a national infrastructure. And I'd like to bring Meg in at this point, if I may. I mean, Meg, you've heard Manoj give a high-level overview of the progress that's been made in India. You survey markets across the world. What are you seeing as you survey the global market, and how do you think about India within that?
Michael, it's really, I want to congratulate you, Mr. Jain, on everything that has happened in the Indian market this year, including the pending debottlenecking of the Kochi terminal. And just listening to you, it really highlights why India is actually the most exciting LNG market today. I think through 2020, India increased its LNG imports by over 20%, even through the COVID period. And as the companies, GAIL, Petronet, Adani Group, others, supported by Prime Minister Modi and Minister Pradhan, do continue to grow infrastructure in India, the market actually has the potential, Michael, as you were talking about, grow from 6% to 15% of total energy use. That represents about 120 million ton potential LNG market. I think as of August, India became the 3rd largest importer of LNG today, and as the world's largest democracy, could easily be the largest importer of LNG by 2030. So as we adjust to sort of the post-COVID recovery, India is actually the leader in that recovery. The LNG market is really back on pace to exceed 2019 imports, and we go into this next 5-year period with supply actually struggling to meet demand growth. I think over the last 5 years, we've brought about 150 million tons of new supply into the market, and for the next 5 years, we have only 50 million tons of new LNG to supply what is actually a strong resumption of growth. So as we think about, supply from the U.S. Coming into Asia, prioritizing India, we're really going to go into the next 5-year period needing to rethink business models and incentivize new supply growth.
Thank you very much, Meg. That 120 million ton is a striking figure, and just to point out to people, that I think is about 1/3 of the global trade today, to give people a perspective of the size potential there. Let's bring in Ernie Thrasher. Ernie, we're interested in your perspective, and I think you particularly bring a cross-fuels perspective. You're familiar with the coal market in India, and you're now looking very much at the LNG market. What are your perspectives on this?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Well, first of all, I think the overall India energy mix is evolving rapidly, not only with LNG, but also with renewables competing with coal in India. I think we have seen dramatic change in the fuel mix in both North America and Europe as gas becomes more plentiful and more cost effective. I think we'll see that same evolution in the India energy mix. However, coal's still delivering to India for less than $3 per million BTU. And even with the energy efficiency factor associated, still a very competitive price level for gas to make a wide-scale penetration in the market. But coal will be challenged. Again, there'll be policy issues, environmental issues, but I think you'll see an evolution, albeit over time, of gas growing market share, probably to the detriment of coal.
Thanks, Rick, and that's good to hear, and to hear that about that shift to lower carbon to the lower carbon fuels. I wanted to come back to you now, Meg, if I may, and ask you about, if you could talk a little bit about how you see the US market as changing the global perspective, and what in particular that means for, you think, for India.
There are actually a lot of things changing.
If we can have Meg first, and then we'll have to hear from you, Manoj, and Manoj. Meg.
Yeah, it's a perfect time actually for update on the U.S. market, because for November and December, we're expecting to see a return to full utilization of the LNG facilities in the U.S. And we can see deliveries today to the U.S. plants just off the gas pipeline grid are now exceeding 9 billion cubic feet a day, so over 70 million tons of LNG expected to be loading, on an annualized basis over the next several weeks and into the end of the year. As we complete construction of the last of under construction LNG trains in the U.S., we will be at over 100 million tons of LNG export capacity. And there are a number of things changing in the U.S. market itself. We have a pretty dramatic reduction in drilling as a result of COVID level prices. I think a 60% reduction in gas-directed rigs. And so we have seen a decline in some U.S. gas production, of almost 10 billion cubic feet a day of decline in U.S. production, and the production is there. We know U.S. can produce gas at these price levels for over 50 years, but we're starting to see a little bit of upward pressure at Henry Hub to incentivize those rigs to come back into operation. And so as we think about U.S. supply and the importance on the LNG market and how companies in India need to think about it, we know that a major evolution that U.S. LNG has brought to the LNG market in the last several years has been supply security and LNG that is fully destination flexible, enabling a liquid market to develop in LNG. And so we need one more evolution to occur on U.S. LNG supply, and that is the creation of Xcoal partnerships and integrated projects so that customers and consumers of LNG can participate in the full value chain in the U.S., own reserves, and have not only security of supply, but actually security of price by understanding the cost of production. Even though we see upward pressure on Henry Hub price, the cost of gas production in the U.S. is still very, very low, less than $1.50 an MMBTU at the wellhead, which means that on a cost basis, LNG can leave the U.S. At less than $3.50 an MMBTU and be delivered to India for less than $5 an MMBTU. So this will be the next evolution in U.S. gas supply, is to actually bring integrated solutions and partnerships to companies in India.
Thank you very much. Manoj, you were going to comment on how you see the US and relative to other sourcing options that you have.
Yeah, we are the largest buyer of US LNG in India, and definitely, as Ms. Gentle has said, that the price outlook, we are also seeing that it is going to be a downward trend, as she correctly said, that even through the different optimization mechanisms, we can definitely bring down the prices, though the Henry Hub prices may be little higher. But overall, yes, LNG market is going to see some lower prices in India, and definitely that is going to help Indian market to grow. And just to point out that 6 to 15%, actually we mean that we are looking at 3 times the present consumption in 2030. Not less than 3 times. So that's going to be a significant number. And then if we look from the domestic production versus imported requirement, definitely this domestic production is going to be another 15-20 million tons only. But the 40-50 million tons has to come from the international market only, from LNG, in the form of LNG. So that's going to be a significant number, and India is going to get more and more LNG, and that's a welcome news that yes, the prices will be affordable.
Thank you very much. And Ernie, as you look on and you look to develop your own LNG, how do you view this market and what you've heard here?
Well, certainly, Michael, I think having a customer is priority number one, I think, is in any market. And I think this last market cycle of low prices and excess supply personified or actually highlighted that. I think the market, we found the market to be very, I would say, open and engaging for new entrants. We, as it tries to build some critical mass and soak up that excess supply. But I think one has to be excited about the opportunities around the world in a decarbonization environment. But again, I'll stress it, it's an evolutionary environment. It's not going to stop at gas. It's going to continue. You're talking about hydrogen in a later panel, and what's happening with renewables around the world is quite astounding. So I think all of us, I don't see coal disappearing. I don't see gas certainly disappearing for a long time, but we have to recognize the challenges we're facing.
What about the terms of trade, the way it's traded? What would be your comment on this shift from long-term contracts to spot trading? When you look at LNG compared to other commodities, what would be your reflection, Ernie?
I think the product is becoming quite commoditized. One of the reasons is the electricity it's producing is becoming commoditized in many markets around the world. But I think one of the interesting attributes of LNG is the storage challenges. And normally in a market that's commoditized, people use storage to arbitrage the market cycles. And of course, with LNG, that's a very costly exercise. Although, as in any market stress, I think a lot of people learned how to store LNG or floating storage of LNG during the last few months. That although it wasn't anticipated, people found solutions to the problem.
So we're finding innovative solutions. Manoj, maybe I was going to ask you about how you think about long-term contracting versus spot procurement. And maybe you also have a comment or thought about the storage issue that Ernie mentioned.
Yeah, long-term versus spot, definitely, as Mr. Thrasher has said, that the trend is changing. And presently, it's 1/3 of spot and 2/3 of long-term in Indian market is there, but we expect that it is to go more towards spot, and not exactly spot, but short-term contracts, primarily linked to JKM or maybe West India marker and all those things. And even we are also looking at some destination swaps and trying to convert these long terms into smaller lots of short-term, medium-term contracts from the other side, from the buyer side. So all this, yes, definitely going to happen, that long-term contracts will be lesser as we pass on day by day, and the short and medium-term contracts will be the order of the day. And spot is definitely going to play a significant role from two perspectives. One is the abundant availability, as Mr. Thrasher also said, the commoditizing of the LNG, and at the same time, the gas exchange, which has started, maybe over a time it will also grow, and along with new gas exchanges, when it comes, so the liquidity will increase. So that will give rise to more spot contracts. So that's the way it can happen. Regarding the storages, definitely it's going to be a little challenging because it costs a lot to make storages, and in India, the difference between prices between summer and winter months are not that significant as we see in the Europe as well as in US. So from that perspective, also people are not having that significant interest in building the storage from the commercial point of view. But the assurance point of view, yes, all the regas terminals have got some storages, which we feel that can be utilized from the perspective of some buffer stock to meet the emergency or critical requirements. Along with that, we also feel now the small scale LNG can play a big role in Indian small industries. So there we say that the distributed storages of smaller capacity, very, very small capacity, may come into play in significant way. And when we are looking at the 150 to 200 new LNG stations, so each station will have few tanks. So those will also cater as small storages to take care of the running requirement of long haul transportation. Thank you.
So that will serve as a buffer. Meg, are your thoughts on the short-term, long-term, and commoditization, and also been quite a lot of emphasis here about storage and seasonality? What are your thoughts?
So watching the evolution of the LNG market has been actually really rewarding over the last decade to see the liquidity that Manoj talked about come into the market. And I think the 1/3 spot in India is probably a pretty good marker for overall trade. Roughly 1/3 considered to be spot, but actually I would argue that over half the LNG in the world is now flexible. So we have accomplished a great feat as an overall industry to actually enable security of supply, so that consumers can actually pursue short-term contracts as they manage, portions or all of their own portfolio. What we haven't yet accomplished is security of cost. And so this is where I think there's long-term contracts, there are short-term contracts or spot, and then there's actually also a third category, which is investment in the whole value chain, so that you can have not only security of supply, but also security of cost, where the production of the reserves is actually a fairly known cost and removes the volatility of various indexes from the equation. And those companies, consumers with balance sheets to be able to be invested in the value chain, can actually bring security of cost to their markets. And Michael, to your question of storage, if we look at what happened this year on storage, it's been actually quite interesting. because we had a bit of excess supply coming into the beginning of 2020, even without COVID. And then COVID obviously contributed to the perfect storm. And so I think we quickly filled above ground storage in Japan and Korea, and ended up having a pretty big drop in LNG imports in those two very important traditional markets. Next, storage filled in Europe, and the role that second tier buffer that Europe actually played to put LNG into storage, back out pipeline gas, and balance the market was sort of step two. And then step three, obviously, was the reduction of supplies from the U.S. So effectively, USA providing that last piece of storage, and U.S. with over 4 TCF of working storage can actually be a really good balancer of the market of last resort, and modify, production at the wellhead, line pack in pipelines, and in-ground storage. So I think that the resiliency of the market has actually been proven through 2020.
Thank you very much. So resilience is one word that stands out, as well as those comments about security for cost. Let's move on in the final minutes that we have to talk about the challenges and what India needs to do or can do to get and exceed that 15% target. Manoj, Jain, what do you see as the critical next steps in increasing this penetration of gas in India?
Yeah, 2-3 things which come to my mind is, one is about the rationalization of taxation and the tariffs. So that is a work in progress, and we feel that in a year or 2 years' time, definitely that may happen. The rationalization tariff may happen very soon. And so that is one area where people will be able to have competitive industries all across the country with the rationalization of tariffs and the rationalization of taxation. That is one part. Second, the government has also embarked upon a new policy about the bio-CNG. So we feel that this will also, in next 4-5 years, play a significant role, where small entrepreneurs are being asked to give their inputs to the growth of the country in the sort of self-reliant India and part. So that will also play a significant role in the natural gas availability available in the local areas. So that is also going to play a significant role in that perspective. Third, as Mr. Thrasher also told, that I can share you one thing, that in the COVID time, when the power demand reduced significantly, still the Indian agencies have not defaulted on renewable obligations. So the pricing is one part, but even in the gas sector, we are now looking at round-the-clock renewables. And we expect that in the next round of round-the-clock renewables, gas is also going to be one of the alternatives which is going to come. So that will be a big boost to gas usage in the power sector, which we have seen not many areas and not many plants are available and they are stranded. So that can help a lot. Thank you.
Can you just clarify for us what is round-the-clock renewables?
Yeah, in India, we have got this bidding for the renewables when people are asked to put the renewables. So one is that the availability of solar and wind. So people are asked to put the combination of solar and wind with some thermal sources. So that when the off-peak and peak are different for these three, so the supplementary part they can take from the thermals. So far it has been the coal which we are using. Now gas is also being allowed in that.
So that 24/7 supply could really help a partnership between renewables and gas. Yes. Meg, what would you highlight, either in India or globally, needs to happen to get to beyond that 15% target?
Actually, one development I find incredible in India is the movement of gas into the transport sector, and the commitment to the filling station infrastructure, with the expectation actually that LNG demand by the heavy trucking sector can actually be maybe 10 million tons a year. which I think exceeds kind of the overall expectation as we think of transport fuel mostly to go into the shipping industry. We have now a new development and the opportunity for LNG really as we think of how gas is going to be needed, it's really in places where clean air is desperately needed and gas can bring zero particulate blue skies into not only power generation, but also by displacing diesel in the transport sector. So this distribution infrastructure and the work that GAIL and others have done to lay the groundwork for the $60 billion of infrastructure spending is really incredible. And I think the industry's been crying for that distribution infrastructure to happen, and now we finally see it coming to fruition.
Okay, so thank you for turning the focus from power and reminding us about the importance of transportation, the transportation sector with India. Yes, Thrasher, your thoughts on how we can achieve this target?
Michael, I think the one topic that no one seems to want to discuss for gas to keep growing is CCS. It may not happen short term in India, but certainly in other parts of the world as we have either a renewed focus on climate or an enhanced focus on climate, some changes in political administrations, and a renewed commitment to the Paris Climate Accord. For gas to keep growing, CCS or some other form of carbon capture is going to be necessary to comply with some of the scenarios under the Paris climate change. And it's a huge technological and commercial hurdle that can't be ignored. No one seems to be tackling it right now.
Ernie makes the perfect transition to the hydrogen discussion.
Yeah.
Since hydrogen goes perfectly with CCUS.
Yep.
Absolutely, very, very well said indeed. It is a transition. I want to spend more time on decarbonisation, but our time is up. But as you say, we will be discussing that in the following panel on hydrogen. I would like just to give the last word to Manoj Jain. If you could sum up your thoughts or give a quick summary of what we should look out for over the next year and your key message on the gas market for India.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very fast growing market, and we see the growth of more than 10% per year. And definitely 15% is a huge task, but the policy initiatives and the push which government has provided, along with the large number of players which have entered into the arena, I feel, yes, that is possible if we can do all together.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all three of you for this illuminating discussion. What's really struck me is there is clearly a potential win-win situation here between the significant needs of the Indian market and the growth and the transformation that we're seeing in the global gas market. And clearly part of the key to this puzzle is to bring those two things together and find the models that can make it work. And as practitioners in this business, I wish you all the best in doing that, and everybody who works in the supply chain. So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us today. And we will watch progress, and I look forward to doing a progress report in 12 months' time to see how far on we are towards that target. Thank you very much, and thank you to the audience for keeping with us and for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Namaste.